you have to recognise that that you've made a commitment to deliver a business outcome, and there needs to be something to do that. And an exec's going to come along and say, if we're not on track, and on track can be adjusting or going longer, or I've hit this knotty problem, so I'm going to park that, but we think we can get an MVP out, then you are giving the business something on the road to do that.
The question is, how do you give the team enough time before you come back and pivot to a result? Because you want a goal. You want to go, we delivered something, we achieved a goal, right? How much time, how do you let them drift to achieve the goal overall, empower them? We're always talking about empowering our squads, right? So that they can achieve the goal. But at some point, the product manager in particular might have some stakeholders pressurizing them to deliver something. How do you balance that out?
Who are the points and the sprint plans for?
I think they're for the team to measure themselves, aren't they?
But I think this is it. I think there's a misconception. I think we build sprints to ultimately build those Gantt chart roadmaps that no one really believes. And it's all an exercise in executive manipulation, right? It's quite, let's just call it out.
We're not thinking about manipulating executives up here, just in case anybody's not clear, right?
We need a roadmap, tick a box, there you go, right? But actually, those points and those sprints aren't to benefit the executive. They're there to have a language that exists between engineers and product people that talks about complexity. And it has to be respected that is their world, their domain. And as soon as the executives try and translate that into fixed dates, you lose the power of all of that planning capability, because actually it becomes a tool for somebody else, not the people that need it. So I think these two things are completely separate, right? People work in sprints. As a product manager, as a product executive, it is your job to try and keep people in the loop about what's going on. But a simple RAG chart will do it. You don't need to start to engage people in sprint outcomes. That is the world of how things actually get delivered. And if you start to let execs and senior leadership meddle in it, it's going to go to shit.
Okay, so I like that. Like, let the experts get on with their expert job, right? But these execs, they are going to turn up, right? And they're going to go, I thought it was going to be ready last week. So Martyna, how are we dealing with that?
That's a tough one.
You can't swear. You can't tell us
Well, first of all, I think coming back to a little bit to the complexity and how we measure things. Everybody keeps thinking that the points are like, this is the number of hours you're going to spend on something. That's not the point. Engineers talk in complexity, not the number of hours they're going to spend on a task. And they don't know what they don't know. So unless you tap into the task, unless you start building, you might miss some complexity. It might seem easy. You only know how much time something is going to take if it's something that's repetitive, if it's something that you've done before, which means that you're not really building something revolutionary, not building something extra, you're not thinking outside the box. So I think when the execs come knocking, it's about managing expectation as well and keeping everybody in the loop. Usually, not always of course, but usually people are okay with the fact that there might be a delay as long as they know about it, as long as they can manage expectations of their stakeholders, and it goes on and goes on. So if you tell somebody up front and you commit to a timeline like we're going to do it in 2 weeks, but actually 4 months later it turns out that it's impossible to do it that quickly, you already, first of all, you committed to something that's impossible without any data, without knowing exactly what the complexity will be. So only simple tasks can be measured that way, but any complex feature, you won't know until you do the discovery, until you start doing the job properly, until you start coding sometimes. And that's one thing. And the other thing I think is also being able to, be able to build the MVP of whatever you're building and then iterate. So very often, and I think as engineers we're guilty of it, we want to aim for the perfect kind of like solution straight away. We want to just make it beautiful so that everybody looks at our code and is like, oh shit, this is like proper stuff. I love it. Like use this library, use this tool, and it's beautiful. Whereas I think the proper engineer is a person that realizes that you're solving business problems. So you need to get to the solution as quickly as possible, allowing you for like later to come back and make it more beautiful, like for the future.
Correct. So that solves our problem of delivering something, right? Because if we go MVP, we'll be delivering the smallest thing that we can in the most meaningful way, but not wasting time, right? And then we come back, pull. If we're iterating, right? We like iteration, that works very well. But given these execs, they keep turning up and badgering us for time, right? Given these execs, do they allow the teams to iterate properly? Or do they go, well, that'll do, we'll go with that?
Well, I mean, to go back and to be tedious, it goes back to actually have you set this up to succeed? And I do think that the kind of absolutist view that, we're doing this in an agile way, I love the Agile Manifesto, and therefore that gives me the absolute right to take 2 years, not 2 months to deliver something, is kind of going to not work. And there is a contract here, and after all, if you're doing Agile properly, you have declared an objective, a business objective, in order to to click and collect. How did we build that? That's very difficult. And you go through, and you do your 2-week sprints, and you're going to do some releases, and you're going to adjust on the way. But I think you have to recognise that that you've made a commitment to deliver a business outcome, and there needs to be something to do that. And an exec's going to come along and say, if we're not on track, and on track can be adjusting or going longer, or I've hit this knotty problem, so I'm going to park that, but we think we can get an MVP out, then you are giving the business something on the road to do that. So I think it's sort of recognising that if the execs are bought into this, they are going to give you leeway. But if you're bought into the business, you've got to start delivering something, and you've got to really work to get something out there to demonstrate that both the method and the solution works. And if it doesn't, they should stop it.
I totally agree with that, and I think some of what you were touching on there was about accountability, and this is something that I looked at with my team last year when we were looking at our objectives for the year and how they aligned to the business. And the business had performed in certain areas, and there were other areas that it hadn't done so well in. And we looked at our objectives, and we were like, yeah, we didn't really help them there, or we could have helped them there more. And we went down to the teams, and we said, right, we're now going to score. You do your performance reviews, and you haven't done that well. And they went, we did what you told us to do. And we were like, oh, okay. And not everywhere, right? And some didn't. Some had more goal-orientated outcomes, but some were JFDIing for us and stuff. And so we looked at that again, and I think that's a really important point, right? It's the team work for the company. They're part of the company. They've got to think about the company, not in terms of just adding value to the shareholders, but like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? What's the whole point? What is the outcome that we're trying to achieve?
You're not a university research department.
Right. So, and I think that aspect of it is really important. John, I don't think we've had your 2 pence on this. You got anything?
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial. I'd say actually deadlines are useful, right? I mean, deadlines are pressure, right? And people and teams need pressure to respond and grow, right? So I think actually, I'm not all for management by arbitrary deadline, but sometimes you just need to set a little bit of an audacious goal and go after it, right? I mean, Empire State Building was built in a year. That was a sort of one-off. It was bespoke. It wasn't been done before. So, you can build the Empire State Building in a year. You can go after doing something. So I think you do need to inject some urgency. It's got to be meaningful. It can't just be random deadline because John said we needed something by the 31st of July. But I actually think you do need some healthy sense of I've got to get to market. I've got to get this. There's people in the room from here who work for startups and scale ups, and they needed to find the first customer, get a platform out there, and they needed to do that before the money ran out. Yeah. So sometimes you actually just need to go hard. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not firing people, but I do think a little bit of pressure is actually really quite important. So I don't think you can sort of just be unencumbered by, we're going to keep going. I think pressure is important.
I totally agree with that. I think one of the other things, several of you have mentioned culture, right? And I think that's the thing where, like I was saying earlier, you come in, you say, right, we're doing product now, right? You've got to ease that into the culture.